There we go. That's working now. I was talking to myself there. So apologies for being a little bit late. Just finishing off a call there. So as usual, this is our weekly market recap, looking at what's been happening with the markets and a look ahead to next week. Hopefully it's all working your end. If someone could just put in the chat that everything's okay, that the sound's okay and everything else, that'd be great. Let me just pull the chat up on my other screen. And what we do in this is go through the major markets for the week, take a look at what's been moving in markets, quite a lot going on this week, lots of volatility, and then also have a look at some of the markets going into next week, see what we can expect, what the major events are to watch, all that sort of thing. I'll just go through the risk warning. This presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones and Capital.com accept no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. Spread bets and CFDs are complex instruments and come with a high risk of losing money rapidly due to leverage. 76.25% of retail investor accounts lose money when spread betting and or trading CFDs with this provider. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets and CFDs work and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Apologies if I sound a bit croaky today. I'm a bit under the weather today, so I don't know what I've got. I don't think it's corona or anything like that, just a bit of a bug. Important events for next week. Tuesday, the 28th September, we've got Japan monetary meeting minutes. So the minutes from the last central bank meeting in Japan. Then Thursday, the 30th, there's a lot going on Thursday. We've got China non-manufacturing PMI inflation. We know this is a big story. It has been building for a few months. Inflation, we've had lots of speculation on inflation with the central bank meetings this week. UK GDP, how well or not is the UK economy doing? And then EU inflation on Thursday. And of course, next Friday is the first Friday of the month. Would normally be non-farm payrolls, but because it's falling on the first of the month, it's been delayed, as it occasionally does, to the Friday after. So even though next Friday is the first Friday of October, if you can believe it, no payrolls on them. We've got payrolls the week after. To find out more, of course, go to Capital.com, open up an account, open a demo account, download our app, all that stuff. To find out more about me and the training course that I run, go to davidjonestrading.com. Any questions after this, general trading questions, clearly not financial advice, go to david.jones@capital.com and follow me on Twitter @JonesTheMarkets, and of course follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter and Facebook. You're watching on YouTube now. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, if you could subscribe, that would be great. We also have our stocks channel. We launched the stocks channel in the last few months or so, and the description for that is down there the link for that, is down there in the description for today. So if you click on that, you can subscribe to our stocks channel. Same sort of format as the main YouTube channel, but focused on US stocks. So we look at normally 3 different stocks throughout the week. Okay, let's get into it and start things off. I thought we'd start off with Bitcoin. I caught some of the news. I've been trying to feel a bit better today, so I've not been following things too closely, but I did see breaking news about China. Let me see if I can bring it up. Was it something saying that China, the People's Bank of China, have said, there we go, all crypto, I'm just picking it up on the BBC website now actually. China declares all cryptocurrency transactions illegal. Okay. So China's central bank has announced that all transactions of crypto are illegal, effectively banning digital tokens such as Bitcoin. So that came out this morning, and I think they launched their own Chinese cryptocurrency. I need to read a bit more about that, but you can see the impact. The news broke, I think it was from about 9 o'clock this morning, so you can see the impact on Bitcoin. I have to say, we did put a Bitcoin video up yesterday on the channel. From a trading point of view, I could be tempted to be a buyer, to be honest, down here. I mean, it's interesting. It's been knocked back. We've had a bit of stability over the last couple of hours. And what's interesting for me, this stability has kicked in ahead of these lows from, where is it, the last few days or so, down around 40,000. So I could be, and look at this, we're looking on the hourly here. I mean, the RSI is pretty oversold if we gave any weight to that. I just wonder, is this not surprising, quite a sharp sell-off by markets? You know, it was trading at 45,000, it's touched 41. So a near 10% fall this morning and into this afternoon for Bitcoin. I wonder if it will recover and have a look at 45,000 in the days ahead. So let's see what happens. I was getting a bit confused by one of the yesterday comments there. I should say as well, once we've looked through all the normal markets, if you put in any markets you want looking at in the chat, and we'll take a look at them when we're done. But I thought that was interesting, that move on Bitcoin today. And I think maybe we'll see it bounce. We do have a couple of trades running on Bitcoin. They've been knocked slightly underwater by this move, bought at 43,000. I think there were orders sitting in the market from the last but one video we did on Bitcoin, and they got filled on the sell-off over the last week or so. But interesting week, interesting one to watch, I think, this afternoon. And this week, this week has all been about, the beginning of the week, definitely, the Chinese property giant, Evergrande. I'm sure you've read it. Worries about a default and not being able to keep up its loan payments, all of that sort of stuff. Some people wondering, I saw a word in the news around Evergrande that I've not read for a while, and it was contagion. And I remember that during some of the Greek crisis, the Greek financial crisis, and the big financial crisis, obviously in 2008, about the fear, okay, it's one company, but it's one enormous company, and it's what's the knock-on effect potentially across financial companies across the globe. And that was, a big worry and a big driver for markets earlier this week. Then we had the central bank's decisions, the Fed decision, and the statement on Wednesday. And I think markets seem to have taken some heart from the fact that they are going to taper, start withdrawing the support for markets, but perhaps not today anyway. Perhaps from November we'll see some of that fiscal support from the central bank being reined in. So I thought, well, let's go to the S&P as usual, and you can see, really, that was Monday, I think, on the S&P. Big sell-off on Monday, and then stabilizes Tuesday, Wednesday. That's where we get the Fed announcement. That's Thursday. That's Friday. So once again, I must admit, a little bit jumpy last week with some of the weakness we were seeing on the S&P. And actually, I think, like a lot of people, I don't just do trading. I've got, sort of ISAs and SIPs and stuff like that. And I did trim back about a third of my S&P and Nasdaq exposure last Friday. Just there are a couple of ETFs. If you're in the UK, they trade on the London Stock Exchange. There's an iShares S&P tracker, and there's an iShares Nasdaq 100 tracker. And I took some of those. I took a third of those out into cash last Friday, and I thought, let me sit things out from here and see what happens, because maybe we're going to have a bit more choppy trading. However, looking at the trends, it's the first time we've seen this trend line broken, and I think that was one of the things that made me perhaps a little bit twitchy. But we haven't really. Well, we have. We've taken out support from August. Okay, so 43.50 lows on the S&P from August. The market did trade as low as 4,300 on Monday, but did claw it back intraday. So I suppose an aggressive trade here on the S&P, or semi-aggressive trade, is to still be a buyer. Still be a buyer with stops below 4,300. So someone just put in the chat, is S&P 500 a buy today or Monday? And then someone has responded saying, buy it yesterday. And that's true, of course. I don't know whether I buy it now. I think for me, for a trade, let's see what happens next week. If we get a bit of weakness next week and we get maybe a better entry point, if it starts going below 4,300, I would be a bit worried about a deeper sell-off. Just looking at what it's done over the last year or so, it's been a fairly relentless grind up, sells off, then goes up, sells off, then goes up. And we just have this fairly sharp V reversals on the way up. And just if it's rolled over and broke below 4,300, it starts to look like it's performing a bit differently to how it's performed over the last 12 months. So I think this 4,300 is the new line in the sand for me in the S&P, 4,300 to 4,350. But arguably we've still got major highs, major lows. So I don't think, famous last words, a crash is coming. But perhaps it gets a little bit harder from here to make new highs. We did have oversold, very oversold RSI down here. So a really interesting one to watch next week. I would still be, if we looked on the hourly chart, I'd still be a buyer of dips. That's what it looked. We've had a bit of a sell-off overnight in the S&P, and look how it's starting today. Really strong start. It's up around, what's it up? What was it in the previous hour's close? Was 44.25. We're now 44.47. So it's moved 22 points within the last hour. So it looks like a strong open today. Let's see what happens. And we do have clearly this bit of a trend chugging along from Monday's low on the shorter term chart. So still bullish. I'm still bullish. I dumped a third of my S&P and Nasdaq a week ago. I've still got 2/3 of it, obviously. So let's see what happens. But that trend's still up. I start getting a bit worried. Oh, someone's saying a Fed Powell speech shortly. So potential volatility early in US trading. Thanks for that. Yeah, all very closely watched at the moment. Of course, the central bankers. Let's take a look at the Nasdaq. So we'll do our stock market indices, then we'll look at some of the other assets. Same for the Nasdaq, really. The Nasdaq arguably does look a bit healthier than the S&P from a trend price action point of view. That's the trend off the March lows. I've had to redraw it at least once, I think. But you could say, looking at that sell-off on Monday, textbook, third touch of the trend line for the Nasdaq. I think what's interesting for the Nasdaq, the S&P broke below the August low. The Nasdaq didn't. So the Nasdaq August low was 14,715. On Monday, the Nasdaq traded down to 14,827. So it was 100 points above that August low. So interesting. I think the Nasdaq. So giving things the benefit of the doubt, you'd have to say the trends are still up in US stocks. September is historically, I think, a tricky month for broader US stock market indices. But so far, at least, we've had plenty of volatility, but that trend still continues to hold. So again, for me, if we saw it weaken again next week, let's see how it performs near these old lows. For me, the most important bit of price data, previous major highs and lows, because it shows us where sentiment changed in the market. And in hindsight, of course, Harry Hindsight, the world's greatest trader, that was a great buying opportunity last week. But I think if you're in the eye of the storm watching it, because markets were really tanking, it took a lot of guts to buy into that sort of, or stupidity, to buy in that sort of fall. Perhaps this was the better one, the bounce back and the sort of the trickle lower and the retest the day after. And the markets still moved, 300 points higher than that. So interesting these markets. Still positive though, I think, for me. Let's bring things closer to home for me. Look at the FTSE 100. It's a bit I think I often say this, it's a bit of a boring one, the FTSE. It can be a bit laggy compared to the performance of US markets, but that trend we've been looking at for a while now. Okay, it had a look below that trend line. That trend's only going back to Feb of this year. It had a look below that trend line, but again, previous major lows down there. 19th of July lows on the FTSE, down at around 6,800. They continue to hold. So let's see. But you can see, we've got US stock markets in September did push to fresh all-time highs. Look at the FTSE. The FTSE is still well below its all-time high. I don't know if we've got the data going back that far, but there we go. So, it's been going up this year, obviously, but it has underperformed versus the other markets. Let's take a look at the DAX and the Japanese market. DAX 40 now, of course, as we have to call it, no longer the DAX 30. I did say last week I was going to do some research on the changes. Needless to say, I haven't. I'll have to have a read and see what those changes were. This is our trend on the DAX going back to the March lows, March 2020 again. It broke out of that trend in early September. But again, like the Nasdaq, like the FTSE, okay, the low, what was the low in July? The low in July was 15,041. The DAX did trade down to 15,015. So it took out that low by 26 points. But, we didn't see a sustained push below that low. So again, for me, that's the level to watch. That's the line in the sand. 14.8 to 15,000. I do think, I've got my gut feel is that stock markets might struggle a bit from here for the next few months, at least, to maintain the sort of pace that we have got perhaps used to over the last 12 months. But so I do think there is upside there, but perhaps not at the same sort of rate that we have experienced. But also, I don't think there's a crash coming. I think so far, at least, the fact that these old levels have held is a good sign. I think if the markets turn lower and these levels get taken out, then I think we need to revise our opinion. But it's been a volatile 6-7 days in markets, but so far, at least, these major levels have held. So let's see what happens. What next? Japan. Then we'll have a look at some other markets. What am I looking at? Nikkei, isn't it? Nikkei 225. It's been a really interesting market. This, I think that's the first time I've said interesting today. Really interesting market over the last month or so. I think I pointed this out last time round. It bears pointing out again. In August we saw fresh lows for the year, pretty much, almost. Yeah, we did. It was fresh lows for the year in the Nikkei, and then into September we saw fresh highs for the year for the Nikkei. And I think I remember saying, if you want to go short, that was the perfect point to go short, because we had this great reference point, the highs from Feb of this year, around about 30,700. So a bit scrappy since then. I think if it can break through 30,800, perhaps the Japanese market starts going its own way. It has sort of gone its own way from Feb through to August of this year, when everything was going up. So I think it is interesting to keep coming back to this. I don't think we've had that much conclusive over the last week, but it's interesting to see, well, what's going to happen. Again, if you thought markets were vulnerable, going short up here, for me, doesn't look like a ridiculous decision. The market's at 30,100 and a bit. I'd have my stop somewhere above 30,800, so that's a 700 point plus stop loss. But if the market revisits those August lows, it's a 3,000 potential target, 3,000 points. So you've got 700-800 points risk for maybe 3,000 points if the market does sell off back to the August lows. From a risk reward point of view, I think it's an interesting one up here. Let's keep coming back to it and see what stock markets do, broadly speaking. Right, let's take a look at, we did stock markets, we had a quick look at Bitcoin at the beginning. Let's take a look at oil, because I've got that short on oil. I don't know how well it's doing. Let's have a look. What's it doing? It's losing money. Actually, it's probably not that far from getting stopped out. Let's take a look at oil. I think it's only the second short I've done in the last year, I think. But that looks pretty bullish, doesn't it? So this is West Texas crude. And I think I was wondering, really, we'd had that trend, hadn't we, since April of last year. And just with the price action being, falling out of the trend, breaking down to its lowest levels since May, I wondered, was this bounce back an opportunity to sell short oil? And that's how I viewed it. And so far, it's wrong. But of course, that's what stop losses are for. I think it's still a bit of a scrappy picture, but I'd have to say at the moment, the short-term trend is up, isn't it? Off those lows from August. Let's see what happens. We do have, a problem area coming in from the highs there, $74, and the high is $76, 74 to 76. Could be a problem for West Texas crude. Interesting market to watch next week. For the fans of the RSI, very overbought up here and potentially bearish divergence. This is me now trying to find analysis to embolster my short position. But I don't think embolster is even a word, is it? So let's see what happens up here. But undeniably strong finish to the week on oil. Can it get through here? If we start breaking through $76, we're looking, where would that put us historically? I mean, there's a lot of resistance up here. Actually, 76 is pretty much the level, isn't it? It's the October 2018 highs. Could that be the start of a move to $100 a barrel? I can't quite see it, but you've got to go with the trend, haven't you? So for me, at the moment, that short-term trend is still positive. I'm still not sure that we're not seeing perhaps a bit of a blip higher and then just sideways trading. Let's see what happens. But if it takes out 76, then I think we could well see a bit more momentum again from there. But I wouldn't, at the moment, I wouldn't sort of be banking on it. But let's see what happens. Of course, oil, petrol, big story in the UK at the moment with some petrol stations or gas stations, if you're from outside of the UK, being closed down because they can't get the deliveries in. The news saying don't panic buy, which of course means we're seeing massive queues at petrol stations apparently. Right, gold. Let's take a look at gold. Gold and silver we're going to have a look at now. Boring markets, I know I always say it, but I would just qualify it with that. So I went to, one of the things I do one of the lectures for the Society of Technical Analysts, which is the UK's official body for technical analysis and charting. So, and I was talking to one of the people yesterday from the SDA, big fan of gold. We were talking about gold and trades it fairly short term, but we were saying how there hasn't been a trend this year. If you go back to August 2018, we're still in this big trend for gold. So longer term, you'd have to say the trend for gold is definitely up. But if we look at the year so far, it's sideways to slightly down, isn't it? So and it's been a pretty boring week. We had a couple of up days on the worries that we saw in other markets, and then as stock markets rallied again, the price of gold has dropped to where it was pretty much a week ago. So it's a market that's got very little interest to me at the moment because we haven't got a trend. But from a trading point of view, watching it going into next week, clearly we can see from March, the March lows at 1675, the August flash crash low at 1660. Lots of support if we saw it sell off a bit from here. I'd rather wait for a bit of a knee-jerk sell-off, perhaps a bit of like a Bitcoin type move that we've had today, and then perhaps there's an opportunity there. But it just feels a bit sluggish at the moment. It feels a bit like it's been forgotten, gold and silver. If people want traditional risk, stock markets have done well. If people want alternatives, cryptos have done well this year. And it feels like gold and silver has just fallen in the middle and just been missed out, I think. Clearly that can change, particularly if inflation comes back, but still a bit of a dull old market for me at the moment. Silver, I suppose, if you're going to be aggressive in silver, we've got a sideways range. Boring market, absolutely, for me, the most boring market of the last 12 months. Well, not the most one, but for the markets we watch. If you really wanted to buy silver as a reversion back to the mean type trade, I think this is interesting down here. If you look, we go back to September last year. The lows at 21.65, 21.65, let's call it 21.50. Had been big support for silver. So what's going to happen? Maybe things are about to get interesting again in silver. I think if you're a buyer down here, we've got an obvious point to set our stop losses at. And I think if we start trading below 21.50, we could well see the start of a much deeper move for silver. I must admit, I think a couple of weeks ago, even I thought about buying silver in my own account. But then I thought, well, actually, if I look at the trend at the moment, it does look a little bit like that. So perhaps I shouldn't be in such a hurry to buy. But I think because we are down at what has been, the floor for silver since July 2020, so 15 months, it is interesting down here, So, but it's still under a bit of pressure from that downtrend. If I was a buyer now, I'd put my stop maybe at 21. And if it breaks below 21.50, perhaps we'll be talking about a new downtrend emerging in silver. Let's see what happens. But not a favourite market for me over the last 12 months, really, because of the lack of a medium-term trend. Lots of swings during the day. Let's take a look at natural gas. I saw that pop up. Gas has been clearly massively in the news over the last week. Should come, about higher energy prices for consumers. Various smaller energy companies in the UK again going bust. Shouldn't come as a surprise to regular live stream viewers. We've been looking at this crazy move in natural gas since April. And I think I said I traded it a bit on the way up because it's been a great trend. I don't know how long you've been subscribing to the channel and stuff, but I remember last year, whenever I do a trade on natural gas, I get it wrong. And I think in a live stream last year, I put up the stats. I'd done about 9 trades on natural gas in, I think it was 2019 and 2020. And 7 had been losers. And it was, if I'd buy it, it would go down. If I'd sell it, it would go up. It's been an absolute nightmare, natural gas, in the last year. But the last 3 months has more than made up for that. We've had this great trend. And of course it went, not quite parabolic, but a heck of a move from August, up something like 40%, I think, from the August levels to the highs. What's interesting for me is perhaps a bit of a contrarian trade, because suddenly gas prices and everything else all over the news. European gas stocks are low, UK gas prices are going up, companies going bust, blah blah blah. But in the last week, or the last week and a half, the price of gas has actually eased back. And this could be the classic case where the market move has happened, but most people don't follow what the market's doing. And then suddenly it's headline news, but from a market's point of view, it's over. So I do wonder, have we seen the high for natural gas? That trend is still up, and I would still be tempted to be a buyer. If I was watching yesterday, I might even have been a buyer. So I'd still be tempted to be a buyer if we got a bit of a knee-jerk sell-off. But the more naive trader may read their BBC News and think, "Oh, gas prices are going crazy. I'll go and buy natural gas." And but perhaps that move has already happened. I don't know. Let's see what happens. I think maybe, famous last words, we'll struggle to see new highs in the short term for natural gas. So maybe, I don't know, for me, my trading, the smarter trade is to sit it out and see if we get a sell-off and a better entry point. Let's see what happens. But interesting that's been so much over the media in the last week or so. So we've done stock markets, we've done natural gas, oil, gold, silver. That's all I use. FX, isn't it? That's what we do. I thought, I think again, it's been a boring year in FX markets. I think the euro is interesting at the moment. But again, if we look at, this is pound against the dollar, I get pretty sideways over the last year, but once again, at the bottom of the range, a bit like silver. 136 has been good support for the pound. Big move off it yesterday, a little bit directionless overall. If we look at the euro, I think similar sort of setup there. I think it's been perhaps a difficult year. I mean, I've not traded much FX this year, to be honest, because again, no big trends. I mean, some decent swings, obviously, but a bit too scrappy for me. But I do wonder again with euro US. These are the sort of trends I like to trade. But with euro US dollar, we have seen 116 to 117 being a floor for the price all the way back to last year, and we're back here again now. So are we going to see a gradual turnaround for the euro? I don't know, but I think it's interesting to watch it down at these levels, but a somewhat sideways market as well at the moment. Right, let's take a look at. I'll just do a quick reminder of the contact details, then we'll go into the questions. So Capital.com. Clearly, this is the platform, our platform. You can download our app from the App Store, trade all these different markets, have a demo account. DavidJonesTrading.com to find out more about me. David.Jones@Capital.com. If you have any questions afterwards, @Jones the Markets, and follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Right, let's take a look at some of the questions. Blah blah blah. Can we have a look at Kingfisher? Kingfisher, I'm guessing that's the UK stock, isn't it? Kingfisher. I mean, to me, it looks. I would say. Okay, what would I say? I'd say that trend is up. Actually, if I was going to do anything, I'd be a buyer. That's what I think. In a nutshell, that's what I would do. So I'd say that trend has been up. Oh, why is it done that now? Hold on a sec. And it's been knocked a bit to the bottom of its recent trading range. So I think my son's working downstairs at the moment. I feel like I'm running a bit of a shared office setup at the moment. And he's maybe hammering the internet. But I think it's interesting that it's come to the bottom of the range, around about let's say £3.30, £3.40. So if I had to do anything, I'd think about being a buyer, but perhaps not today, because we've just today seen new lows for the last 3 months or so. So I'll be waiting to see if it snaps back, but I would be coming into it thinking, right, I probably want to be a buyer here. It's not the greatest trend, because since April of this year, pretty sideways, isn't it? But if we went back to March of last year, obviously an uptrend since then. So I would be tempted to be a buyer and see if it can swing back up to the more recent highs. So let's see what happens. Can we have a look at tallow oil? Let's have a look at those. Tallow. Tallow oil. It's just, again, I mean, I hate these stocks for a start with their chart. I know I often say this, the ones that have absolutely fallen off a cliff and can't go any lower. I mean, what would you say? I mean, you could say, at a push, what could you say? You could say the trend is up, right? The trend, again, going back to, I don't know how relevant that trend's going to be. I'm not a fan of these smaller stocks, as I often say, and I know they're very popular with retail investors in case they strike oil and their share price goes up tenfold. For me, if I had to do anything, I'd probably be a buyer. We are seeing, it's been knocked back from 65 pence down to 40 pence. If I was a buyer now at 47, I'd have a stop loss the other side of 40. So that for me would be the trade on this one. I wouldn't be short selling. I'd be looking to be a buyer, but I could probably find something better to buy that was in a better trend, if that makes sense. But that would be the trade for me. Clearly, we've seen a bit of stability in the price over the last couple of months ahead of 40, so I could be tempted to be a buyer. But yeah, it's not the ideal stock for me. Some of these smaller stocks. Right. So just have a quick look at the Bitcoin again. I'm quite interested in this Bitcoin thing, given the slide today, to see what it does the rest of today. I do wonder if it's going to continue to recover. It has continued to recover while we've been talking. So I do think that's an interesting market, given the reaction to the news from China. Yeah, interesting one to watch. And of course it trades over the weekend as well. So let's see what happens. And there's a lot of stocks coming through. I'm going to skip some of the stocks. I don't want to get too bogged down individual stocks, because I think it's a bit more, not I'd say interesting stuff, but as maybe a bit of a wider appeal to people, like copper. I will go back to the stocks if we've got time. So copper, someone's saying, what's your view on these huge copper dips? So we'll look at these huge copper dips, shall we? Big swings, isn't it? I mean, it's a bit of a boring market. I've got a trade. I've got an open position still in copper. And you're right, a lot of volatility in copper, but it is trading now at 424, where it was 3 months ago and where it was 6 months ago. So copper's been a good market for me last year and for the first half of this year. But it's just sort of stalled, hasn't it? I must admit, I'd still be a buyer. I think that bigger trend, that broader trend is still up, even though it's had a couple of little looks below the trend line. I think if it turned south from here and broke below that 396 low from August, I'd be out of it, come out of the trade. But for me, it's gone a little bit boring. But overall, I think we've still got just about major higher highs and higher lows. It's just dull, isn't it? I know I'm very quick to criticise silver and gold for being dull. This has been quite dull since June of this year. But I still got one open position in there, trying to see if the trend wakes up and gets going. We looked at silver, didn't we? Looked at silver, whether it's a buying opportunity. The Russell 2000. Let's have a look at that. We don't look at that. And I don't look at that myself much either. So it's the smaller cap, isn't it? Smaller mid cap. That sort of, what's the best way of describing it? Index. Small cap index consists of 2,000 of the bottom stocks from the Russell 3000 index. Interesting. I didn't know that. There you go. Bit sideways, isn't it? More than a bit sideways. It's doing an impression of gold or silver over the last 6 months. So it's interesting that the big stuff, the Nasdaq, the S&P, and the Dow to some extent, continued to make fresh all-time highs until recently. But look at the smaller cap stuff. So your typical, maybe more typical American businesses, not the global conglomerates, a little bit sideways, isn't it? So stuck pretty much slap bang in the middle of that range, so 2,100 to 2,400, that sort of zone. So at the moment we're in the middle. What would you do? It's stuck in the middle. So for me, it's a bit of a nothing thing there. It's a buy the extremes, isn't it? If it gets knocked back to 2,100, look to be a buyer. If it trades above 2,300, perhaps look to sell short. But otherwise, a bit directionless, or more than a bit directionless, after a great run that's seen it more than double off the March lows. Pretty directionless overall, isn't it? We'll do one stock, Visa. Let's have a look at Visa. Big finance company, obviously. Oh, I've got a trade on Visa. Don't know. Must have done that in a live stream. So up 48 quid on that trade. Let's have a quick look at what's been happening with Visa. I think I would be a buy on that dip, actually. Let's have a quick look. So, I think with technical analysis, you've got to be pragmatic. Nothing. It's very rare that markets will move how they do in the textbooks, yeah. But we had a nice trend in Visa. Looks something like that. I guess that's why I bought it. Let's take a look at when it did that trade. When was it? Oh, the 3rd of September. Okay, so we did it in a live stream on the 3rd of September. So it would have been here. So this is my give it one last chance trade. So even though it had fallen out of the trend line, I often think, well, let's give it one more chance. Just because it falls out of the trend line doesn't necessarily mean the trend is over. I think what's interesting is that it has just about held over these old lows, the May lows. So for me, that is an interesting trade setup for me. The only question is, we've seen quite a move this week, haven't we, for Visa from 220 to 230. Do you wait and see if we get a bit of a sell-off next week and we can get it maybe at 224, or do you just think, do you know what, I'm just going to buy it now and put a stop loss the other side of 215? But that would be the trade for me. It's stop loss the other side of 215. And I think if it starts to lose that, it does start to look as if perhaps sentiment is changing. So I think that's an interesting one. Visa, nice little spot in there. Someone's putting something in French to me. Unfortunately, I can't read French. Drop me an email. I can't speak French either. Would you say we're in a risk on or risk off market? Looking up to pick up a few stocks with the recent recovery. Interesting that. I don't know. I think we're in a twitchy market, a market that is perhaps getting more and more easily spooked, okay, by potential bad news. And I do wonder, I mean, we saw clearly lots of volatility with the Evergrande thing in China earlier this week. We've still got, I do think inflation, is going to be much more of a problem than central banks seem to think it is. And I think, markets have ratcheted up their concerns about inflation. So, I think the markets do feel a bit more nervous than they did 3 to 6 months ago. Whether that means we have this bigger sell-off or just continue higher but at a lower rate, I don't really know. But I think it's, it does feel a bit twitchier. But, who knows? I've still got loads of stocks, like I'm sure most people have. So let's see. We looked at, someone's saying natural gas. Gas will be 30 to 40% more expensive this winter in Austria. Yeah, I think that is because of the European lack of inventory in Europe, and also clearly that rising natural gas price since then. I lost my shirt on natural gas. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm guessing you were short. I don't know, but it's not nice. Hi David, do you have any strategies for trading the VIX? I must admit, I do keep an eye on the VIX. I think it's a very hard market to trade. I wouldn't personally. Because the VIX, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the volatility index, often referred to as the fear index. It's based on options volatility on the S&P 500. How much of a premium are people paying for options? How much fear effectively is there in the market? I don't think you can trade it. Is my honest opinion. You've got to buy it and hope that something happens to spook the market. Or I suppose actually the contrarian and perhaps the more successful approach is whenever it spikes up, sell it. Because you can see the spikes don't last very long. until they do, of course, and they're like here in 2020, you sell the spike, and then the thing goes up another fivefold as the coronavirus hits. But for me, I have to say it's a market I have absolutely no interest in trading, personally. So, but good luck if you do. Good luck with it. Do you think 15% a month is a realistic profit target? It's a really good question. I'm going to start it off with my well-worn line. Most people lose. We have that big risk warning at the beginning. Most people lose when trading. So I think, let's say you've never traded before, and I guess if you're saying 15% a month is a realistic profit target, that you're new to trading, which is completely fair enough. We all start somewhere. I think in your first year, if you could not lose money, you'd be so far ahead of so many people. And then take it from there. You know, if you made 15% a month as a fund manager, you'd be a superstar. If you made 15% a year as a fund manager, you're a superstar. Yeah. So I think we need to have realistic expectations when it comes to trading. Do not believe the hype of people, doubling their accounts every month. If I was doubling my account every month, I wouldn't have time to post pictures of Instagram of my account on Twitter. I'd be too busy buying up large chunks of the world on doubling my account every month. So I think you have to be realistic. In my own trading, if I look back, and I do keep track of this, over the last 3 years for my own trading of stuff, my account is up about, it averages out about 5.8% a month, which for me is a cracking rate of return. If you make 6% a month, you double your account every year. Yeah, so I think let's have a realistic target. And if you've never traded before or you're new to trading, do not think it's going to be easy. Go into it with your eyes open, is what I'm saying. So I don't think 15% a month is a realistic profit target, is the answer to that one. Okay, dollar South African rand. Someone's saying we missed out on that. I remember looking at that a few weeks ago, wasn't it? And said I have to come back to it. Let's see what it's done. I'm guessing it's turned around, is it? Let's have a look. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Well, I think we're looking at it for a reversal. So dollar strength. Dollar strength, rand weakness, great little entry point there. September the 10th, another great Harry hindsight trades. Market goes bang, 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 sells off, and bang, off we go again. So really interesting market there, dollar rand. So for me, I mean, again, perhaps it's a little bit overstretched in the short term, but that 14 level has been really good support, but did miss that one. Yeah, we did gold. Palladium. I think these, Palladium and platinum getting really hit. Great markets, again, for me, the last couple of years. Not so great in the last few months. There you go. So there we had that, I could do with redrawing that trend line, but you get the general idea. This is the price of palladium. Fresh all-time highs in May. Absolutely clobbered into September. I don't know why. I know palladium goes into catalytic converters. Not many cars are getting built at the moment because there aren't the chips around. I can't believe that's the reason the palladium price has dropped 30%. So for me, it's one I keep an eye on. We've got a lot of support down here, 1700 to 1800. I'm really surprised by that move, but there you go. I bought it. I was long in here somewhere and got stopped out on the way back down. That's what stops are for. I think it'd be interesting to see if it tries to make a base down here. But yeah, real weird moves in palladium over the last few months or so. Let's take a look at platinum, because that's another one that had a great trend. But trends don't last forever. Where's platinum? Oh, it still looks pretty weak, doesn't it? So platinum, actually, if you want to go short, it looks like the last couple of days, this is the perfect level to go short in platinum. Another one with a great trend off the March lows, March 2020 lows, down about 600, more than doubles into Feb of this year, and since then it's dropped about 30%. That old trend's gone on platinum. Arguably, should we do a short? Let's do a short on platinum. We haven't done a trade today, have we? I think it's interesting. The market has run up to 1,000 and has come off it quite sharply. We've got lots of support up here. So resistance, sorry, up here. Let's go short with a stop loss at 1070 in platinum and go with this trend. So close at a loss. What did I say? 1070 on platinum. And we normally risk 100 quid or so, don't we? So let's do that. That'll do. So I'm going short. Basically, I think the trend is down. We've had a bit of a bounce up. The market's turned again the last couple of days. Got lots of resistance up here. So I'm going to put my stop up here. So if it gets to up here, perhaps I'll change my mind. But let's sell that. Let's sell short. There we go. So we're short platinum. So yeah, quite a turnaround for these platinum and palladium this year. What do you recommend for the next oil movement? We covered oil. I think it might go sideways, but if you watch this after we finish doing it live, there's a bit more chat about oil. $76, I think, is the big level to watch on the upside for oil. It's definitely strong in the short term, and I am the wrong side of it. Why do different brokers have different prices on foreign exchange pairs? I don't think they should do. If you're looking at the spot market, so if you're looking at, it shouldn't be that different anyway, because if it was, there'd be an opportunity. If you look at pound against the dollar, there's our price, 136.75, with a bit of tiny bit. Oh, it looks like we've got zero spread on that at the moment. So it shouldn't be that different. So if you find an example, send me an example via email. But if we're quoting 136.76 for the pound, I'd be surprised if anyone else was different. DXY, yes, the dollar index. Didn't look at that. I think this is, along with the Nikkei, my longest running trade is the dollar index, and it's we've looked at this. I think it's a really interesting market to look at because it's the dollar against a basket of other currencies, like I always say. And I'm wondering this year, have we seen a turnaround in the dollar index? It did hit new highs for the year just about in August, a bit weaker since then. I'd still be a buyer on dips. It's if I was doing a trade, what would you do? I think there's a couple of ways now. I think now you can either wait and see if it breaks above those August highs and buy the breakout, and 93.74 would be the level, or you buy it anticipating a breakout. There's a lot, and put a stop loss, I don't know, down here, or you sell short thinking actually the dollar's going to turn. So I think it's always an interesting market. I'm still leaning towards perhaps we'll see further dollar strength, particularly if you see a bit more nerves around the financial world. Yeah, but again, you'd have to say it's a little bit sideways over the last few months, isn't it? But it's interesting up here if it can break out through those August highs. Let's see what happens. Bitcoin is dying. Bitcoin is dying. Hang on a second. I never thought I'd be so obsessed with Bitcoin. It's in that news today, you see, that's done it for me. Really excited. I think it's always interesting how markets, it's not dying, what are you talking about? It's always interesting how markets react to news, and it can be an opportunity, I think, when we do see a knee-jerk reaction by a market to some news. I must admit, I thought it would have been hit more. I'd be interested to do a bit more research about this Chinese news. I suppose it did go down 10%. I mean, that is a big move, 10%. So let's see what happens. S&P 500, we did the S&P 500. And I think that's it, isn't it? Is that the end of the questions? If that's the end of the questions, we will wrap things up there. So as usual, go to Capital.com to find out more. DavidJonesTrading.com to find out more about me. David.Jones@Capital.com. Any questions? @JonesTheMarkets on Twitter. Follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And I would say, I think it's been an interesting week. I think, for me, interesting markets to watch next week. S&P and Nasdaq, because we have seen a strong turnaround this week after some of that volatility. So I think these are interesting markets to watch going into next week. Silver is perhaps interesting for the first time in a long time because it's back down to the lows for the year. If we see it start to crack below 21.50, perhaps we'll see a much deeper sell-off in silver. Lots of shouts of conspiracy theories and everything else, I'm sure. But it's I think that is an interesting one to watch next week because it's down at these levels, down at these historical lows, silver. So an interesting one to keep an eye on. But we're gonna wrap things up there. I'm gonna go and try and sort myself out. And if you have any questions, drop me an email. Go to Capital.com to find out more. A bit rushed today because I am feeling a little bit under the weather. So apologies for that. Back to normal next week. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for all the different updates we do throughout the week. Right, that's it. Let's leave it there and have a good weekend.